Hello everyone, I'm your storyteller, and tonight we dive into the dark side of online dating. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me where and when you're watching. Now, loosen up, close your eyes for a moment, and let the darkness lead you into these stories. Episode 1, The Jerky Package from Hell. St. Hollow, Prison, and Inmate. Martin Canaanites at St. Hollow were always colder than anywhere else. Summer or winter, it did not matter. The dampness in the old brick walls seeped into the flesh. It left a numbness, like a freezing hand clinging tight. I had worked as a warden there for more than 10 years. I knew every creak of the iron bars, every gust of wind whistling through the narrow door gaps. But there was one thing I could never get used to. Martin Kane's laughter. Martin was unlike the other prisoners. Most came here with weary eyes, bored eyes, or defiant eyes, but he was different. Even in the dark, his eyes lit up, as if he savored every minute of captivity. When I patrolled past his cell, he would press his face against the bars. He would whisper words that chilled me to the bone. "Keeper, has your family had dinner today? Does your daughter like spicy or sweet?" He had not been in contact with the outside world for years, and yet, somehow, he knew very well about me. The name Martin Kane echoed across the region, not because he was infamous like the gangs out there, but because his crimes went far beyond imagination. People spoke his name in a trembling voice, as though mentioning a nightmare. I do not want to repeat the details. It is enough to say this. He destroyed the life of an old soul, in a way even the cruelest would shudder at. What puzzled me most was this. Instead of a heavy sentence, he was given 15 years. Imprisonment with psychological support. The reason? The victim's son pleaded for a reduced sentence. He believed Martin was insane, that he should be treated, not punished. I could never comprehend such forgiveness. And because of that mercy, every day, I had to live with fear that Martin might one day walk out of these doors as a free man. One morning, I was assigned to check incoming packages. I saw the name, Elizabeth Kane, Martin's mother. She had sent him a box of jerky. Food from outside was strictly forbidden, but the order from above was clear. Allow it. I still remember the officer reading the letter. "My son, I've started a small shop. These are trial products. Taste them and give me feedback. We will rebuild from the ground up together." Mother, when the box was opened, a smoky aroma surged out, mixed with sharp spiciness that made me sneeze instantly. On the surface, it looked no different from market snacks. But there was something indescribable. The smell clung stubbornly in the nose. It refused to fade away. Martin took the box, his eyes gleaming. He devoured it on the spot, lips curling slightly, as if savoring a delicacy. The sound he made while chewing silenced the corridor, wet, lingering, as though he wanted everyone to hear it. I stood there, swallowing dryly. For some reason, that smell unsettled me. Deep in my throat, like a faint metallic temps. From that day on, Martin became a figure of power. He no longer fought for food. Other prisoners cleaned for him, served him, just to exchange for a piece of jerky. They all said it was delicious, fiery, fatty, helping them forget, even briefly, the musty stench of prison meals. But when I passed by, I saw something else. Trembling hands lifting a piece of meat, chewing ravenously, yet eyes wide, wet, as if about to cry, as though they were both fed and forced to swallow something horrific. That smell grew stronger each day. It spread into the guardroom. I once opened the window, inhaling the cold night air, trying to clear it out, but every breath still carried that faint raw stank. It clung to the tip of my tongue. I knew something was wrong. I just could not put it into words. And with each passing day, my unease grew, like a shadow slowly enveloping St. Hollow Prison. Asterisk, since the day the jerky boxers appeared in St. Hollow Prison, The atmosphere completely changed. The cell blocks, once filled with damp and rust, were now infused with smoky, spicy, greasy aromas. It should have been a positive sign, something to make prisoners feel at ease. But to me, it felt like a fragrant veil covering something dreadful. I remember very clearly the first time I dared to taste it. When checking a package, I broke off a tiny piece, slipped it into my mouth. At once, my tongue went numb. The smoky flavor shot straight up my nose, so pungent my eyes watered, but beneath that aroma was something else, like rust, like a faint, metallic temps clinging to the throat. I swallowed quickly. That entire night my mouth flooded with saliva, my throat parched, my stomach churned, as though I had swallowed something not meant for human meals. The next morning, I was haunted by the sound of chewing from Martin's cell. He never ate in haste. He chewed slowly, teeth grinding harshly, then closed his mouth, letting out a sound KHUC, as if struggling to swallow something too tough. Between those chews, he moaned softly, like a man savoring pleasure. The echoes carried down the corridor. They made my skin crawl. What struck me more was how the other inmates began to change. One, once so violent he screamed all day, now sat silently, waiting for hours, just to trade for a scrap of jerky. His eyes were glazed, like an addict's, yet flickered with strange light when he finally bit in. Another, once weak and bullied, suddenly turned aggressive after a few tastes. I saw him hurl himself at a fellow prisoner over a single bite. His eyes were bloodshot. His breath reeked of sharp, smoky spice. Even in communal meals, many abandoned their rice, trading for just a single slice of jerky. And then, the hall would fall silent, filled only with the rustling sound of chewing. Sitting far away, I could still hear every gulp, every hiss of breath. Like an eerie choir, I began to investigate. During one late-night shift, I secretly opened Martin's package. The wrapping paper was soaked with oily sheen, the odor far stronger than usual. Between the slices of meat, I found a note. "My son, this time I tried a new recipe. It will surely make you remember forever." The handwriting was neat, soft, filled with affection, but on the back, brown blotches, dried into patches. When I brought it close to my nose, I smelled rusted iron. That day, handing the box to Martin, I forced a smile. "Your mother changed the recipe. Well, is it better?" Martin bit into the first piece, closed his eyes. The veins in his neck twitched, as though forcing down something hard. Then he opened his eyes, stared directly at me, and smirked. "Me. So good, I could bite off a finger too." He laughed, and I froze, a chill racing down my spine. A week later, whispers spread. Martin's mother had opened a small shop near the prison, specializing in jerky. The store's name was Mom's Jerky. The packages kept coming, letters always attached. Recipes changed, sweet, spicy, heavily smoked, but the flavor never changed. It always carried the same undertone, a metallic temps, faint, raw, sticking to the throat, making me queasy whenever I thought of it. The more time passed, the stronger my conviction grew. That smell did not come from animal meat. One night on patrol, I heard a hacking cough from the cell next to Martin's. I shone my flashlight inside. A prisoner bent over, clutching his chest, blood trickling from his lips. Instead of crying out in pain, he gently licked the blood, closed his eyes, as though savoring a familiar taste. That night, I could not sleep. In my dream, I was locked inside a dark cell, a plate of jerky before me. I raised a piece, chewed, and a whisper crept into my ear. "You like it too, just like us now." I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, yet the smoky spice, the metallic temps, still lingered in my throat as though I had truly eaten it. The day Martin Kane was about to finish his sentence, I lived in indescribable anxiety. In less than 2 weeks, he would walk out as a free man. I could not stop thinking of his whispered words. "Does your daughter like spicy or sweet?" I knew well he was not insane. He was sharp, cunning, manipulating an entire block of inmates with those jerky packages. One late night on duty, I decided to watch him. I pretended to record logs in the guard room, waiting, watching. Martin received his latest package. As usual, he opened the box, pulled out slices of meat, shared them with a few close followers. But this time, he kept a small bag aside, stuffed it quickly under his mattress. When the hallway was empty, I unlocked the cell. I searched on inside the bag were slices of meat, darker than usual. So tough they were difficult to break. I picked one up, sniffed, the familiar smoky scent, but mixed with something else. Acrid, greasy, like burnt hair, mingled with old blood. And then I saw it. A thin strand woven into the slice. Dark brown in color, looking exactly like human hair. The next morning, I could not hold myself back. I went to the address on the package, Mom's Jerky. The shop was small. A new sign hung above the door. Smoke wafted from the entrance. Inside, a strange man stood at the counter. I asked for Elizabeth, Martin's mother. He looked at me, smirked, gestured for me to follow. He led me into the kitchen at the back. The room was choked with smoke, but beneath it, a stench so strong it burned my sinuses. On the tables lay trays of drying meat, dark red, uneven in fiber. Then he pointed upward. I looked up. My heart stopped. A human head hung there, skin shriveled, hair matted, dripping onto the floor. Beside it, a handwritten note, the final recipe for the day of freedom. The man leaned close to my ear. He whispered, "I am not her son. I am the son of the victim Martin destroyed. Every slice he has eaten all this time was what remained of her." His voice was steady, not angry, not trembling, just cold certainty. I stumbled back, knocked into a tray of meat. The smoky iron stench rushed up my nose. I fled the shop, never daring to look back. That night, I told no one. How could I? Who would believe me? A prison guard claiming his inmate had been eating his own mother. On the day Martin was released, the final package arrived. The chief guard handed it to him with a smile. "A farewell gift from your mother." Martin tore the wrapping, raised a piece to his mouth. I watched from afar, my heart racing. He bit into it. Seconds later his face twisted. He clutched his stomach, screaming. His shrieks echoed against the stone walls. The other inmates panicked. I stood frozen. The smoky scent drifted in the air, mingling with his throat-tripping cries. That day, Martin Kane was officially recorded as released. But after he stepped past the prison gates, he vanished without a trace. No one ever heard of him again. As for me, whenever I pass the now-closed Mom's Jerky shop, I still feel that smoky sting creeping down my throat, a sweet aroma, hiding within it the metallic temps of rust, clinging in memory to the very end. Episode 2. The laughter behind the boiling pot, the cold walls, and the first scream. Iron Vale Prison stood on a desolate stretch of northern land. Its thick concrete walls rose like a fortress. Sunlight never slipped through for more than a few seconds. People said the moment you stepped past its iron gates, even time itself froze solid. I was brought into Iron Vale in the early 2000s, barely over 20. My first taste of life behind bars. The day I arrived, the chill from the cement floor seeped through my thin shoes. It numbed my feet. The clash of metal, the slam of a cell door. Everything came crashing in at once. My heart pounded, like it wanted to leap out of my chest. The cell was narrow, just enough space for a wall-mounted bed, an old sink, and a chipped porcelain toilet. The air was thick with dampness, mingled with rust, and the sweat of generations of inmates. I swallowed. Bitterness clogged in my throat, as though I had gulped down my own fear. In the first days, I tried to stay unnoticed. Here, a single wrong glance was enough to spark an attack. There was a gang that ruled nearly the entire D block, where I was locked up. They sat in the corner of the dining hall, spoke little, but everyone kept their distance. Their eyes were cold, faces carved with scars, and when they laughed, the sound was dry, like razors scraping against glass. In prison, even the smallest things could become weapons. At Ironvale, hot water was one of them. The faucets in the common room always spat out scalding steam, bubbling like a kettle. Prisoners used it to cook instant noodles, make powdered coffee, even wash wounds. But in the wrong hands, that boiling water turned into a horrifying tool. One afternoon, I went to fetch water for noodles. The hallway was empty, filled only with the hiss of pipes. I had just turned the faucet when a scream tore through the air behind me. This scream was unlike the daily noise. It was sharp, stretched, soaked in despair. It raised every hair on my skin. The sound echoed down the steel pipes, dragged endlessly. I spun around. A prisoner writhed on the floor, clutching an arm, blistered red. White steam rose from his flesh. A harsh stench hit me in the face. It burned my throat. His skin was blotched, bubbling, smoking. I could smell it, pungent, acrid, sickening enough to make me gag on the spot. Beside him stood another man, from the gang in D Block. He held a metal mug, still steaming. He didn't shout, didn't laugh, only stared at the victim collapsing before him, his eyes frozen, like ice. I stood paralyzed, my hand gripping the faucet, my feet glued to the floor. My body shook, but not a single sound escaped me. Then the man looked up, his eyes locked straight on me. That gaze was a blade. It sliced through my spine, made my heart skip a beat. For a moment, I thought I was next. Then came the thundering of boots, the shouts of wardens. The tension broke. I exhaled sharply, realizing I had just slipped past something monstrous. But that night, lying on the metal bed, I still heard the blistering scream, echoing down the halls, and stranger still, beneath it, I could hear faint laughter, stretched, scraping, like metal grinding against metal. The incident that afternoon threw the whole D block into chaos. The guards dragged both men away. The one who got burned was taken to the infirmary. The guy holding the cup of boiling water was escorted somewhere. Nobody knew. I thought I'd never hear about them again, but I was wrong. The next day, the prison grew unusually quiet. No one spoke of the incident openly. A few inmates only whispered to each other. Their eyes darted around, as if terrified of something invisible. I tried asking an older inmate. He only shook his head slightly. In here, sometimes the one who causes the trouble is easier to guess than the one behind it. His words sent a chill racing down my spine. A few days later, as I was being led down the hall to meet my lawyer, I caught sight of two guards carrying a stretcher, covered with a white sheet. The fabric was so thin, the ceiling light cast through it. A tattooed arm dangled limply outside. I recognized it immediately. It was the guy who had thrown the boiling water. Knifed, my throat went dry. I quickened my pace, not daring to look for long. Yet in my head, I still heard the victim's scream from days before. I thought the story ended there. But a few days later, the burned man returned to his cell. When he walked in, the entire dining hall fell silent. His whole body was wrapped in white bandages. Only his eyes were exposed. But what made everyone shiver was the smile. He sat down, chuckling hoarsely through the layers of gauze. Laughter mixed with his ragged breath, like wind whistling through a pipe. His eyes gleamed, not with pain, but with the look of someone who had just gained a secret. I sat not far away, hearing every rumble of laughter vibrating in his throat. The smell of disinfectant from his bandages filled the air, sharp, nauseating. It mixed with the thin porridge in the hall until I felt sick. Day by day, he grew stranger. Once, I saw him whispering to another inmate, "Do you hear the bubbling in your head yet? Like boiling water? Listen closely, it's still boiling." Then he burst into laughter, muffled, harsh, echoing through the cell. People said he had taken the life of the one who threw the boiling water at him, but the way he came back wasn't like a victor. It was like a new being, born from the scalding pot of water that night when everyone else was asleep. I was jolted, awake by a strange noise. A rattling, clinking sound echoed from the hallway. I cautiously peered through the crack of the door. The white-trapped figure stood silently in the corridor, his head tilted to one side, shoulders shaking with quiet laughter. In his hand, he held the old metal cup, shaking it steadily, as though listening to invisible water boiling inside. I hurried back. My heart pounded violently, but even after I pulled the blanket over my head, I could still hear that faint laughter, seeping all the way into my dreams. Asterisk. Rumors about the death spread quickly through Ironvale prison. The man who threw the boiling water was dead, but no one dared speak it aloud. They whispered he had been strangled with shoelaces, then his head forced into the very pot of water, still bubbling furiously. I didn't know what was true or false, but one afternoon, passing by the infirmary, I glimpsed a body. A white sheet covered it. Beneath the thin fabric, the scalp bulged, blotched, deformed, and the stench of burnt flesh clung to the air. Stronger than the disinfectant, I knew it was him. But what was far more terrifying was the one still alive, the burned prisoner. The one who returned wrapped head to toe in bandages. He grew stranger by the day. Each night, he sat against the wall, gently shaking his empty metal cup, smiling faintly. At times he whispered, "Do you hear it? The water is still boiling inside." My ears, his voice rasped, yet steady, like a song. I heard it clearly, and in that moment, my own ears began to hum, like tiny bubbles rising in a kettle. I pressed my hands tight against my ears, but the sound still slipped into my skull. One night, as the prison sank into silence, I was jolted awake by echoing laughter. I opened my eyes. Through the bars, a dim yellow light spilled into the corridor, and there he stood, his body wrapped in white, glowing stark against the darkness. He tilted his head, shaking the old metal cup in his hand. No water inside, yet the rattling clink, clink rang out unmistakably. His eyes flared through the slit of bandages, locking on me. Then he laughed. The sound stretched on, boiling water spilling over, hissing with each burst. I trembled, curled beneath my blanket. The tighter I pressed my ears, the louder the laughter grew. It filled my skull, as though it came from inside my own head. I don't remember how that night passed, only that the next morning, he sat eating his thin porridge, white bandages marked with damp patches freshly soaked. He was still smiling, a twisted grin beneath the cloth. 2 months later, my lawyer secured my release. The day I stepped out of Ironvale, I drew a long breath, hoping to rid myself of the damp, smoky stench. But the first thing that struck my nose was the faint, acrid smell of hot water. That night at home, I sat in silence. The ticking clock filled the room, and then, within that stillness, I heard it again, the faint boiling inside my ears. I knew I had left Ironvale, but the laughter behind that boiling pot will echo in my head for the rest of my life. Episode 3. The Man in Orange in the Forest. The Silver Moon Night at Deepwood. I was 14 that summer, the age when I still believed the forest held only wind and birdsong, that the night brought only silence, nothing to fear. My family lived in the small town of Deep. The wooden cabin in the forest was only for weekend retreats. My parents often said it was a place to breathe in the freshness. The cabin lay nearly 10 kilometers from town, surrounded by dense woods, trees so tall they seemed to swallow the sky. By day, the forest was lush green, filled with the resinous scent of pine. But at night, the trees turned into black masses, interwoven like hands reaching up from the earth. That night, the full moon draped the forest in a pale silver glow. The leaves glistened as though covered in dew. My parents went to bed early after the long trip. I wasn't sleepy. Instead, I suddenly wanted to wander, to visit the little wooden shack my father and I had built last year. Deep in the woods, quietly, I put on a jacket and opened the door. The wooden hinges creaked in the still night, sounding almost like someone groaning. I paused, then stepped outside. The cold air bit against my skin, carrying the musty smell of damp earth and rotting leaves. I knew the path into the forest by heart, a narrow trail, roots jutting up like giant veins. The chirping of insects blended with the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. Now and then, a gust of wind swept through, and the forest wailed like thousands of whispers at once. As I neared the shack, a chill ran down my spine, not from the wind, but from the faint smell of smoke in the air. No one else lived here except my family, and my parents were already asleep. The odor wasn't warm kitchen smoke, but acrid, heavy, like damp ashes. I quickened my pace. The shack came into view, dusty and draped in cobwebs, just as I had left it. I brushed off a wooden chair inside, sat down, hugged my knees. My heartbeat pounded against the rhythm of the forest, yet I could sense something unnatural creeping in. Then came the sound. At first, only faint footsteps in the distance. I thought it could be a deer or a fox, but no, the sound was too heavy. Each step made the ground shiver slightly. Dry leaves, cracked underfoot, closer and closer. One by one, I held my breath. The smoky stench thickened, sharp enough to sting my nose. Through the gap of the window, I peered outside, and my heart stopped. In the silver moonlight, a figure emerged, tall, gaunt, clothes torn. Most striking of all, the tattered orange uniform, the kind I knew from prison images on television. He stood still among the trees, clutching a long metal bar that gleamed under the moon. Looking closely, I saw dark stains smeared along its length. His breath rasped hoarsely, mixed with the reeking smoke that clung to him. Suddenly, he bellowed in a raw, broken voice, "Benny, I'll find you." The scream echoed through the woods, slamming into my chest like a hammer blow. He began striking the trees with the iron bar, wham wham, each crash sharp and violent, sending leaves tumbling down. Night birds burst into frantic flight, wings beating furiously, mixing with his deranged howls. I shook uncontrollably. My fingers clawed at the edge of the chair. My breath came in ragged gasps, my mouth dry, a bitter taste flooding my throat. I knew, if he stepped into the shack, no one would be able to save me. I pressed my breath down, my back glued tightly to the moldy wooden wall of the hut. The pounding of my heart thundered in my ears. It drowned out even the insects in the forest. Through the crack of the window, I could still see him. The ragged orange outfit blotched and torn caught the moonlight. It glimmered like dried blood. He circled around, head tilted to one side, as if listening. Every time he stopped, the forest fell silent, a suffocating silence. Then suddenly, his hoarse voice stretched out, "Benny, where are you hiding? I can smell you. Smell the burning. Can you hear it?" I bit my lip until it bled. I forced myself not to make a sound, but the metallic temps of blood mixed with the smoky stench in the air. It made me gag. Suddenly, the wooden floor beneath me creaked. Just a small sound, but in the night forest, it burst out like a firecracker. Immediately, he turned his head toward the hut. His bloodshot eyes gleamed from the dark hollows. His footsteps thundered over the dry leaves, pounding straight toward me. I panicked, darted out the back door, sprinted into the forest. Branches whipped across my face. They stung my skin raw. The smell of sap and damp earth rose sharply. Roots cracked beneath my feet. Behind me, his chasing voice echoed. "Don't run, Benny. I just want to talk." A rasping laugh rumbled. It mingled with the clanging of metal as he scraped the bar against the trees. The harsh sound made the forest shudder, as if it too were afraid. I ran and ran, breath breaking, chest burning. My ears rang. I heard only the hammering of my heart and the heavy footsteps crashing through the leaves behind me. Suddenly, I tripped on a root, sprawled onto the cold, damp ground. The earth reeked of rot and mushrooms. It choked me. I struggled to rise. Moonlight caught on the gleam of metal. He stood less than 10 meters away. His head bobbed. Drool dripped from his mouth. His wheezing breath rasped like an old pump. He raised the iron bar, hissing through his teeth. "Benny, finally found you." I froze, my whole body paralyzed with fear. Salty sweat streamed down my lips, the briny tastes mixed with the acrid smoke clinging to him. In that desperate moment, a sound rose from afar, a metallic siren wailing from the town. He jerked. His eyes darted wildly. The laughter cut off. A guttural growl rose deep in his throat. I seized the chance, lunged sideways into the thicket. Thorns tore my hands bloody. I didn't dare look back, only heard his insane screams, the crashing of metal against trees. That sound followed me all the way back. When the wooden door of my house appeared, I hurled myself inside, locked it tight, collapsed onto the floor. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, but even in safety, I still smelled the smoke clinging to my clothes. That suffocating stench, as if he still stood just outside the door, waiting for me to step out. Asterisk. I woke when the first light of dawn pierced the cracks of the wooden window. My whole body ached, my throat parched. The metallic temps of blood still lingered on my tongue. I hadn't slept all night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him again. That blotched orange suit, those wide white eyes blazing under the moonlight, his rasping laugh entwined with the acrid smoke. My parents had no idea what had happened. They only saw me pale and haggard. I couldn't tell the truth, only mumbled something about a nightmare. But deep down, I knew it wasn't a dream. The scratches from forest thorns on my arms, the smoke-stained clothes, the bruised feet from running. All of it was real. That morning my father turned on the old radio. The broadcaster's voice droned steadily. Then one line made me jolt upright. "This morning, police confirmed the escape of a prisoner from the state penitentiary, 30 miles outside Deepwood. The man, Walter Griggs, age 43, was convicted of arson and attempted murder. He was last seen wearing an orange prison uniform and is believed to be roaming the forest near Deepwood. Authorities advise residents to lock their doors and avoid going out at night." The words struck like hammer blows. A chill washed over me. Sweat soaked my back. That name, Walter, echoed like a ghost from last night, bound to his shadow. The stained iron bar, that deranged howl of Benny. All morning, I stayed silent. Every glance out the window revealed tree shadows stretching across the ground, like reaching arms. The smell of smoke clung stubbornly to my nose, even though my mother lit incense all through the house. I swallowed hard. Bitterness rose in my throat. That night, I dared not step outside. Yet as I lay in bed, faint sounds drifted to my ears. The clang of metal against wood thud, then a rasping laugh, like breath hissing through burning coals. I shot upright, heart racing. But outside, there was only the forest wind threading through the leaves. And in the wind, I caught a whisper. "Benny, you can't run forever." Years have passed since then. I left Deepwood behind, but whenever I pass a forest, I still catch the acrid scent of smoke in the breeze. Hear branches crack beneath unseen footsteps, as if he's still there. And on bright moonlit nights, When the wind howls long through the window, I still hear that rasping laugh, dragging each syllable. Benny. Episode 4. The Windows Without Shadows. Block 6. After being released from prison for theft, I was sent to a labor re-education camp. On the outskirts, it was called Dormitory Camp No. 6. The place used to be an old collective housing block. Before that, it had been a psychiatric hospital back in the 1960s. They patched it up a little, shoved us in, called it temporary housing for vocational training. From the first day I set foot there, a chill ran down my spine. The walls were blotched with moss. The ceiling cracked in long streaks. A musty dampness seeped through every gap in the bricks. It mixed with the acrid sting of cleaning chemicals. Even under the blazing afternoon sun, the corridor was pitch dark, stretching endlessly, as if without an end. My room was on the 3rd floor. The window faced a sparse forest. The curtain was old and dusty. It fluttered whenever the wind blew, revealing the scratched, clouded glass pane. Through that window, all I saw were broken trees. A pale moon hung above, dim light draping the forests like a mourning shroud. That first night, when everyone was asleep, I tossed and turned. The damp air clogged my throat. A metallic, musty taste swirled on my tongue. I sat up, took a sip of water, then absent-mindedly glanced toward the window, and my heart clenched in the clouded glass. A figure stood still. No face could be seen, only a tall, thin frame with narrow shoulders. The moonlight behind it cast its shape sharply. What made my skin crawl was this. I was on the 3rd floor. Outside was nothing but empty air and the forest far below. I rubbed my eyes, thinking it was an illusion. But when I looked again, the figure was still there. Head tilted slightly, as if staring right at me. I blinked once more. In that instant, the figure vanished. My heart pounded wildly. Cold sweat beaded down my nape. I yanked the curtain shut, tried to steady my breathing, yet I could still hear faint tap-tap sounds, like fingernails rapping against the glass. That night, I barely slept at all. The next morning, I told one of my roommates about it. He only gave a faint smirk. Welcome to the 3rd floor. Every night, someone visits the window, but don't worry. They never come inside. They just stand there and watch. He said it with a calmness so eerie it froze me in place, then lay back down, drifted off to sleep, leaving me stiff as stone. The 2nd night, I couldn't sleep. Again, the air in the room was thick with dampness, like hundreds of mouths breathing down my neck. I tossed and turned. The acrid stench of old sweat rose from the moldy mattress, choking my throat. Finally, I sat up, pulled the curtain aside, and looked out. This time, it wasn't just one figure. In the pale moonlight, 3 or 4 shapes stood in a row outside, the glass pressing their faces against the window. The clouded panes seemed clearer, revealing the details of their faces, chalk-white, without eyes, without noses, just a stretched, thin layer of skin, glossy like candle wax. I fell back onto the bed, my heart hammering. A steady thud, thud, thud began to echo, like countless fingernails tapping the glass all at once. The sound droned on, dragging itself out, sending chills racing down my spine. The next morning, I decided to ask a few others. A huge black man, usually silent, stared at me for a long time, then lowered his voice. I saw them too. On this 3rd floor, every night they stand there watching. But don't be stupid enough to touch the window. Anyone who touches it is gone. I shuddered. What did gone mean? But he said nothing more. Just kept silent, his weary eyes heavy, as though they had seen far more than I could imagine. The 3rd night, it got worse. My 3 roommates and I huddled together, none of us daring to sleep. The air was so thick with mold, it felt like the whole building was rotting and breathing around us. At midnight sharp, the thud, thud, came again, this time from every window along the hallway. We rushed to the door crack to peek outside, and what I saw still haunts me to this day. Every single window along the corridor had a figure pressed against it. Dozens of blank, pale faces, identical, tilting their heads in unison, as if listening. Moonlight shone through, making those faces glow with a sickly pallor, reflecting in my eyes, as though the entire building had turned into a giant mirror full of ghosts. One of my roommates, trembling, couldn't take it anymore. He lunged forward, slammed the door, and shouted, "Who the hell are you?" Instantly, the tapping stopped. The corridor fell into a suffocating silence. Then, from outside the door, came a whisper. Dozens of voices at once, blending into one. "We used to be here." He collapsed, mouth gaping, unable to make a sound. The only things left in the room were our ragged breaths, and the metallic stench flooding in through the cracks, like fresh blood carried on the wind. The next day, the entire third floor sank into a heavy silence. The roommate who had screamed the night before was gone. The guard only said briefly he asked to be transferred to the first floor, but we knew the truth. He hadn't asked. He had been taken. I began to pay closer attention. Every morning, the hallway windows bore faint smudges, as if something had clung to them from the outside. The marks weren't like dust or condensation. They had strange shapes, resembling the imprint of faces pressed against the glass. When I touched one lightly, the pain was icy cold. A sharp sting shot from my fingertips straight to my heart. I yanked my hand back. Yet even from that fleeting touch, I could hear in my ears the faint echo of the sound from the night before. Thud, thud. That evening, I decided to ask an old janitor in the camp directly. He gave a dry laugh, his voice hoarse. "They're not ghosts. They're what's left of the ones who came before." I swallowed hard. "You mean?" He lowered his voice, glancing around. "This place used to be a psychiatric hospital. They did electroshock experiments, locked patients in isolation rooms for months. Many of them died slumped by the windows, their faces pressed tight against the glass. Even now, their faces remain there. You only see them after nightfall." I froze, his words carved into my chest like a knife. On the fourth night, I stayed awake. At midnight, the thud, thud, echoed again throughout the hallway. I didn't dare look anymore. But through the thin curtain, the moonlight cast shadows of faces glued to the glass, dozens of heads tilting in unison. Then, from nowhere, a whisper brushed against my ear. "Tomorrow night, it's your turn." A chill seeped straight into my nape, freezing my blood. I shot upright, trembling all over. The room was silent. My cellmates were still fast asleep, as if they had heard nothing. The next morning, I decided to escape the re-education camp. I didn't care about the consequences. I only knew that if I stayed one more night, I would never get out. And yet, even after leaving that place, in restless dreams I still saw those windows, hundreds of pale faces pressed against the glass, tilting their heads all at once, eyeless, noseless, just skin stretched taut and glossy like wax. And I know, even though I have left, whenever night falls, if I dare to pull the curtain open, those faces will still be there, waiting for me in silence, patient, beyond the glass. Episode 5. A room that is never locked. I was transferred to Redstone Prison in the winter. The facility had stood since the 1940s. Thick walls, narrow corridors, heavy iron doors. Every single cell was locked tight, except one, a room at the end of the basement corridor. The door was always ajar. Just walking past, you would see a pale slit of light spilling out, dim flickering, like the last breath of an oil lamp. No guard ever mentioned it. No inmate dared ask. People whispered its name, Room 11. On my first night in Redstone, I heard a sound. The corridor was silent. Only the steady drip of rusty pipes from the end of the hall. Room 11. A faint scraping, fingernails dragging slowly across brick. The sound stretched on, hissing lightly, line after line drawn into cold stone. I lay in bed, blanket over my head. The more I covered my ears, the clearer the sound grew. It echoed inside my skull itself. The acrid scent of rust filled my nose, mixed with another sharper stench like burning hair. The next day at mealtime, I asked the long-term inmate quietly. He gave a dry laugh, but his bloodshot eyes betrayed sleepless nights. "You're new, so you're curious. Don't look into room 11. Just stand near the door, and it'll see you first." A shiver ran through me. You mean, who's in there?" He didn't answer, only stayed silent, and I saw his hand trembling as he gripped his spoon. On the second night, I decided to try. I crept out into the corridor. The flickering yellow light buzzed overhead. The damp smell of mold seeped from brick walls, mixed with the metallic temps of rust. It choked my throat. The closer I moved toward the end of the hall, the louder the scraping became. When I stood before room 11, I froze. The light inside spilled in a sickly yellow glow, faint, unsteady. I peered through the crack. For an instant, I saw a gaunt hand, fingers unnaturally long, blackened as though charred, slowly clawing against the wall. The moment my eyes met it, the hand stopped. Then, it began to turn, back toward the door. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. At once, the door creaked open wider. A long groan, like someone deliberately inviting me in. After that night, I no longer dared step into the corridor, but the scratching followed me into sleep, right by my ear. Slow, dragging, screech, screech, screech. Between the sounds, faint whispers drifted. No man's voice, no woman's, just murmurs floating in the dark. "Come closer, open the door." Goosebumps covered my skin. My mouth went dry, ash coated my tongue. One day, during mealtime, I risked asking, "The old inmate again?" He glared, then whispered, "Years ago, room 11 was solitary confinement. They locked away the insane ones, the ones who killed even fellow prisoners. One guy stayed inside until he died, but his body was never taken out." My chest tightened. "You mean, the body is still in there?" His voice hardened. "Who knows? Only thing we know. Since then, no one dares to lock that door. You lock it. It's open by morning. The light, always on. Even though this prison removed the bulb years ago." That night, something terrible happened. Around midnight, footsteps echoed down the corridor. I cracked open my eyes. A thin, frail prisoner was moving toward the end of the hall, toward the ajar door. He stopped, lifted his head, trembling, as if hypnotized. He reached out and pushed the door. Room 11 opened wide. Sickly yellow light spilled into the hall. I caught a glimpse, just a glimpse of a gaunt figure. Its hair hung down, hiding its face. Hands unnaturally long, curling, beckoning, inviting. The prisoner stepped inside. The door slowly closed behind him. The next morning, he was gone. Guards brushed it off. He was transferred. But we knew better. No one was ever transferred. At night, and certainly not from the basement. His bowl sat on the dining table, slippers still under the bed. Only, he never came back. That night, I lay awake, restless, in the damp, moldy stench. The whisper returned, right against my ear. "Just one step. Come in with me." I bit my lip until blood filled my mouth. Metallica. Bitter dot at the back of my throat. I smelled it. Burning hair. Acrid. Nauseating. That smell, seeping out from the crack of room 11. The fourth night. I couldn't wait any longer. The scratching, the whispers, the stench of burning hair. All of it wrapped around me like invisible chains. I had to see it for myself. The corridor stretched ahead, flickering with that sickly yellow light. The metallic temps of rust clung to the air. Each step made the smell of ashes burn heavier on my tongue. Room 11 waited, still ajar. This time, the light inside was not electric. It flickered like a flame, dim, wavering. Beside the crack of the door, the plaster was shredded. Hundreds of claw marks. Chunks of wall peeled away. Hands that had dug desperately, never escaping. I swallowed. Then, slowly, I pushed the door. It groaned, heavy, as though something resisted from within. Inside, darkness pressed on me. Only the flickering yellow glow in the far corner moved. The air burned hot, acrid. The smell of burning hair, burning flesh, clawed at my nostrils. Twisted. Faces bulged from the bricks. Eyes and mouths wide, frozen in screams. Some trembled, lips moving faintly, whispering voiceless words. In the center crouched a frail figure. Hair hung down over its face. Grotesquely long hands scraped endlessly across the floor. The sound, grinding, sharp, dry. White smoke curled upward with each stroke, carrying that acrid, searing stench. It lifted its head. Charred, blackened skin, hollow eye sockets, no nose, a gaping mouth lined with blackened teeth. It laughed, hoarse, crackling, wet coal catching fire. At last, someone dares to enter. I stumbled back. The door slammed behind me. Darkness swallowed everything. The smell of scorched hair burned my eyes. Whispers rose from all around. "Stay here, with us," I screamed. Pounded the door until my hands bled. Then it burst open. I collapsed outside, gasping, drenched in cold sweat. The corridor was silent. The yellow light flickered, as if nothing had happened. I turned. Room 11, still ajar. No flames, no whispers. The next morning, I burned with fever, drifting in and out of delirium. In my dreams, I was back inside, the walls seething with clawing faces, the blackened hand beckoning, curling toward me. When I woke, the taste of ashes still lingered on my tongue. Episode 6. The Forgotten Chapel. The rotten wooden gate. I had been imprisoned in many places, but Redvale was the strangest. It was built at the end of the 19th century. Churches and prisons stood side by side. People believed prisoners could be redeemed through prayer. That was why, in the backyard, an old chapel stood. Gray stone, a small but tall bell tower, a thick wooden door marked with a worn cross. The problem, that chapel had been locked for more than 50 years. No one went in, no one repaired it. Yet every prisoner knew, at night, sounds came from there. Bells, choral singing, whispered prayers. The first night I heard it, it was raining. Rain pounded hard against the iron window. The smell of rust mixed with damp earth rushing into my nose. The whole cell was cold and wet. I pulled the blanket tight, but still shivered. Amidst the rain, the bell rang. Boom boom, faint, distant. Yet, clearly from the backyard, a guy in the same cell sat up suddenly, eyes sunken, voice trembling. "Hear that? The chapel bell. They're praying again." I shuddered. That chapel. No one can get in, right? He looked at me. A crooked smile. No living person can. The next morning, while working, I passed by the backyard. The chapel's wooden gate was mottled. A rusty iron lock, the size of a fist, dangled heavily. Stone walls, covered in moss. Deep cracks spread like old wounds. I pressed my ear to the door. Inside was silence. Only a musty stench, heavy with ash and rotting wood. Strangely, for a moment, I felt a bizarre sweetness on my tongue, as if I had tasted altar wine left to ferment for years. A guard caught me glancing. He barked, "Stay the hell away from that place." He gripped my hand tightly, eyes truly frightened. Nothing like the usual threats. On the second night, the rain stopped. The moon was bright. The bell tolled again, longer, steadier. After the bells came choral singing. Male and female voices blended, neither high nor low. droning as if from underground. I listened closely, each word like muttering, language unclear, but rhythm, exactly like a church hymn. An old prisoner in the room burst into sobs. He buried his face in the pillow, I asked. He shook his head, voice choked. Years ago, I had a friend. He vanished after being punished to work near the chapel. That night, the whole prison heard him singing in the choir. To this day, he still is. I shivered, my spine ice cold. By the third morning, rumors spread. Some said they saw a candlelight flickering through the chapel door cracks. Others swore they saw a white-robed figure behind the wooden window bars, holding a prayer book. Worse still, some claimed they smelled the stench of blood mixed with incense, smoke, as if a ritual had never ended. That night, I couldn't resist. I secretly looked out the window toward the backyard. Cold wind blew through, stench of damp earth and rusted iron heavy in the air. Pale moonlight spread silver over the stone roof. The chapel's wooden door was ajar, just a narrow crack, but enough for a sickly yellow light to seep out in that instant. I swear I saw a tall, gaunt figure inside, hooded, dressed in white robes, facing the door, and began to sing. That sound was unlike any living voice, both clear and mournful, spreading through the air. My ears buzzed, my chest clenched, as if squeezed. I smelled the acrid, scorching reek of incense, bitterness of ashes sinking into my throat. The entire prison fell silent. No one dared move, only that lingering song, blending with the heavy toll of the bells, echoing deep into the bones. I tried to close my eyes, but in the darkness, I could still see vividly the rotten wooden door slowly opening wider, piece by piece. Asterisk from the night I saw the white-robed figure. I could no longer sleep in peace. Each time I closed my eyes, the long lingering chant echoed inside my head, endlessly reverberating. At times, the tone was light as the wind. At others, it pressed down, dragging each word, like a choir singing from beneath the grave. The next morning, I resolved to find out. During labor, I questioned an old guard, more lenient than the others. The moment I mentioned the chapel, his face turned pale, his voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you want to die? Never speak of it again?" More than 50 years ago, there was a ceremony there, and none of them ever came out. I froze. "You mean the prisoners were locked in?" He looked around then, growled. "No, both the priest and the prisoners. Dozens of them. They held a midnight mass. Then the doors were sealed shut. By morning, when the warden opened it, the chapel was empty. Not a single body, not a drop of blood, only the suffocating stench of incense smoke." He walked away, leaving me numb. That night, the sky was clear, the moon glaring bright dot. No bells rang, but instead came the weeping dot at first, a woman's fragile sobs, then a man's choking cries, then more and more. The choir of the night before had turned into a chorus of wails, overlapping, mournful, echoing across the courtyard. The acrid incense stench rose again, mixed with the raw metallic temps of blood, twisting my stomach. I covered my ears, but the cries grew louder inside my skull, as if they seeped straight out of the stone walls. A cellmate trembled, whispering, "Someone new has been brought in. Every night there's crying. Is the night someone will be called." I swallowed, hard, cold sweat running down my spine. I asked, "Called? What does that mean?" He gave a crooked smile, voice shaking. "It means the next night, when the chapel doors open, the chant will gain a new voice, and that prisoner will vanish." The next morning, just as he said, a prisoner from the opposite cell disappeared, without a trace. The guard still brought meals to his bed, as if unaware, yet his prison uniform was still draped over the bed frame, his sandals still on the floor. The following night, when the chant rose, I clearly heard a new voice in the choir. hoarse, unsteady, but blending seamlessly with the others. I recognized it as the voice of the prisoner who had just vanished. From that moment, I no longer believed the chants were hallucinations. I understood that every voice in the choir belonged to someone the chapel had swallowed. And then, as I tried to steady myself, something horrifying happened in the dark night. Just beyond the barred window, a pale face pressed silently against the glass. Empty eyes, lips moving in sync with the chant, producing no sound, yet I heard the song inside my head, every word clear. I stumbled back, blood filling my mouth from biting my tongue. The cell was pitch black, yet I still saw those hollow eyes, boring into me, inviting me to join the choir. Asterisk on the fourth night, I could not bear it anymore. The crying had ceased, but instead, the choir resounded again, strong, simultaneous, like a ceremony reaching its climax. The singing rose and fell. The strange rhythm made my heart beat along, as if an invisible hand was squeezing my chest. I recklessly stepped out into the corridor, searching for the way down to the backyard. The air was freezing cold, mist heavy with the smell of mold, mixed with the acrid scent of incense. The closer I came to the chapel, the more bitter the taste of ashes thickened on my tongue, my throat dry and burning. The rotten wooden door ajar. A pale yellow light shone from inside, flickering like candlelight. I trembled, but my legs felt as if pulled by someone, stepping straight in. Inside, the space was covered in a dusty haze, but the main hall was bright with hundreds of candles, placed everywhere. The acrid smell of burning wax mixed with dense incense, making my eyes sting. On the rows of rotten wooden benches, shadowy figures in white robes sat upright, heads bowed, hands clasped before their chests. I glimpsed their faces pale white, eyes tightly shut, lips moving. The sound rose in unison, drilling straight into my ears. Though I knew clearly, their lips were not moving at all. At the center of the altar, a tall, thin priest stood upright, hands raising a tattered prayer book. His face no longer had flesh, only a bare white skull, teeth bared, as if smiling. Yet, from the empty eye sockets, a blazing golden light burst forth, flickering like fire. His voice resounded, merging with the singing, "Amen." I wanted to scream, but my throat was frozen. My whole body turned cold, yet my tongue burned, as if someone forced me to drink that bitter sacramental wine. Suddenly, the choir simultaneously turned their heads toward me. Dozens of empty eyes, hollow and gaping. Candlelight reflected within, like abysses devouring the soul. A voice resounded, in unison. Hundreds of voices blended together. "Sit down. Sing with us." I backed away, but the door behind me had vanished. Only a cold stone wall remained. The singing pounded, echoing until my head felt about to burst. I clutched my head. The stench of blood filled my nose. The bitter taste of ashes clogged my throat. In panic, I collapsed. Before my eyes, the priest raised his hand in blessing, the skull's grin glimmering in the firelight. The choir still resounded, wailing endlessly. I do not remember how I escaped. When I awoke, I was lying in the cell, my whole body drenched in cold sweat. Outside the window, daylight had come, but what horrified me the most was that in my throat, I still had my own voice, softly humming along to the melody of the previous night. I could not control it.